Hello and welcome to the very first New Reformer interview, the first one of many more to come, so stay tuned. I'm George Finch, and it's my pleasure to say that joining me today is Jake Hoffman, the International Co-Chair of the Young Republicans. Jake, thanks for coming on. Can you start by telling us a bit about yourself and your role within the Young Republicans?
Yeah, so my name is Jake Hoffman. I am actually the executive director for our Tampa Bay Young Republicans. I'm our state committee man here for the state of Florida's Young Republicans. And I'm also our international co-chair for the National Young Republicans. So a lot of people don't know how this kind of thing works, but we have a city level, a state level, and then we have the federal level in the United States here with the way that the Young Republicans work. It's similar to how the Republican Party works, but for those under 40 years old. So I'm involved from the local level all the way to the international level.
Okay, so back in the United Kingdom, we don't have much youth participation in politics. Is it a predominant thing in America?
Well, the Republican Party has had a longstanding problem with having much older participation. The youth getting involved in politics is not just an issue in the UK. It's probably an issue worldwide, I would argue. Young people tend not to be involved in politics. And in America, a lot of people don't get involved in the Republican Party, especially because they've felt historically that they're not speaking to the issues. We have a saying here in the United States that, if you're a Republican when you're young, then you have no heart. And if you are a Democrat when you were young, you have no brain, right? So like this is type of kind of like the situation that we have in America, where most people who are young tend to lean a little bit more liberal. They tend to lean a little bit more Democrat in the United States for those definitions, because they haven't really experienced paying taxes, buying house, having kids, raising families, all of these types of things that once you become a little bit older and more established, you start to experience those things, and you kind of lead with the Republicans because you tend to see that they've got a lot better policy.
Yeah, because I do know that as they say, as you get older, you do turn to the right side a bit more, and get more conservative. So, is it right that you ran for the House of Representatives for Florida in the 65th district in 2022?
Yes, yeah, we've got a House of Representatives here. The way that it works in America, especially in the state of Florida, we have the same way that you have Congress and the Senate up nationally, and the president. We have a governor, a state house, and a Senate. So we have a state version of what happens nationally at the state level. So yes, I ran for the state house a couple years ago, lost by 200 votes. We'll take another shot at it sometime.
Yeah, that's good though.
Yeah.
So running for Florida's House of Representatives is a local level race, but many of the issues raised have national implications. So
Mhm.
how do you balance addressing local concerns with contributing to the broader national debate?
Well, the good thing about being in Florida is that we have a very Republican supermajority, that we call it, right? So you've got almost all Republican control in the state of Florida, and you've seen that with Governor DeSantis. And the good thing about Florida being one of the largest states with one of the largest economies is that when we do something here, when we pass legislation, it gets picked up by other states. They look to Florida to see what's Florida doing, and then they use the legislation that we've done, and then they start to bring it to another state. And we're such a large state that when it could even affect the federal policy as well. So one example being election integrity. This is a bill that we worked on, that I worked on personally back in 2021, where we changed a lot of the election laws that we saw after 2020. Very, very problematic after COVID. The mail-in ballots, the private funding of supervisor of elections offices, like all of these things that combined to help Trump lose the 2020 election. These are things that we fixed here in Florida, and then you started seeing other states pick up similar legislation, similar language, fixing their elections. And now I'd say we've got 30 or 40% of the states have good election laws. Unfortunately, 50 or 60% of them don't have great election laws. But this is what happens. We try to do something locally. I tell people all the time that you can control the local, and you can, and because of we're a Republican state, we have direct influence on what happens at the state level. Usually as a young Republicans, we come up with a couple sets of bills every single session, and we say, hey, these are our priority bills for the young Republicans. We work with the senators and the state representatives to file these bills, to get them through the process. And then, yeah, every year for the past so many years, we usually get one or two bills filed that were young Republican bills, and they pass, and then they might have a lasting effect beyond Florida.
Well, that's really good. At least they're listening because
Yeah.
in the UK they don't tend to listen. When you're in the council seats, you're like you have your state house. In our constituencies, we have small councils, and their policies are constrained with what happens within that town or village, or so we don't get to see national change. So, which local issues in Florida do you believe could serve as models for national policy?
Well, there's quite a few, and the young Republicans. Again, we're in a very unique situation here. This is not the usual case for the young Republicans around the rest of the country. If you're in New York, if you're the young Republicans, they do a great job up there, but they can't really get legislation passed because they've got Democrat supermajorities and majorities in a lot of their major cities and in their state legislature as well. So, despite their best efforts, they can't probably get legislation passed. And even in other states where you see it split or it's closer, it's not as much, or the young Republicans don't have as much influence, it doesn't really quite work the same way. Again, in Florida, we have a very unique situation. In Tampa, we've grown to be I think we're close to the second largest young Republican organization in the entire country, behind New York. And this type of influence that makes them actually listen, because we're speaking for a large group of people who's putting pressure on them. So that's one of the pieces. And then as far as things that could go into the future of like what Florida's working on, that will have an effect on the rest of the country. We just did one recently, which is interesting, about banning lab grown meat. That was a really unique piece of legislation where we're trying to protect real food and real farmers here in the state of Florida. We've got one coming up that I don't know if they're going to listen to us on, but we're also concerned about weather modification, something that actually like Tennessee and some other states have banned. Altering the weather. I don't know how much it happens over in the UK, but they create clouds, they create storms, they make it rain, all of these different types of things. So that's kind of something that we're focused on right now as the young Republicans, and it's not. It doesn't just stay there's so many different issues. Like I said, we worked on elections. We did restored felon voting rights here, which was a big issue. These are different things that are arguments that have kind of changed in Florida that have then affected other states and maybe federal policy as well.
Yeah, is the young Republicans, are they quite national? Like they in Texas, are they all across the states?
Yeah, so almost, I believe we have a statewide Young Republicans organization in every single state, so all 50 states, and then each city has a varying level of how active and how large their Young Republicans are. So yes, Dallas has a big, Austin, Texas has a big group, Arizona has a big group. California's got a group in LA, and so they're all over the entire country, no matter if it's a blue city or a red city. But we have young Republicans all over the country.
Yeah, so I'll just move on a little bit to questions about the UK's role in global
Mhm.
trade. So, with the UK now free from EU regulations, how do you think it can position itself on a major player in global trade?
Well, as far as the UK goes, I think that you guys have a lot to sort out, obviously, still with Brexit, and I know it didn't all go as planned, right? There's a lot still to figure out there. America is going to help its partners, and America is going to help its allies in Europe in a lot of cases. Now, Trump comes in, he talks a lot about tariffs. These are things that are going to affect, places like China, places like Mexico, that they want to, that a lot of our companies want to offshore into other countries, and then send back the goods after they're using slave labor to give us products for cheaper. But so Trump has made it a big piece of his platform to come back and say we're going to put tariffs on. These are things that the UK needs to be concerned about. There's a chance that some of these tariffs, if Trump is in, affect the UK and the trading between the United States and the UK. But I think it'll be on a more individual country basis on how it's done. And then you have to deal with NATO, and Trump's feeling on NATO is very different than a lot of our other presidents, whether Republican or Democrat, and his idea of the United States overfunding a lot of these groups like NATO. That's something that's not going to change under Donald Trump's next presidency, which very hopefully we have. where, he's going to look to other countries to say, you guys should pay your fair share, and all of these other things. So there's a lot of dynamics at play. Obviously, the answer is very, very different depending on whether or not Donald Trump wins or Kamala Harris wins.
Yeah. So again, like with America being the main funder and supporter for NATO, I do kind of sympathize with what Trump's saying, and most Americans when they say that America needs to start putting pressure on their allies because they do. America does put more money into NATO than all of the allies combined. So I do believe that America just need to put more pressure on even the United Kingdom, on France, Germany, to start going, hang on a second, we've paid millions and billions, and France and Germany not paying their fair share. America's helped us in World War One, two, the Cold War. Our relationship with America goes back hundreds, 200 years.
Mm-hmm.
So we see each other as strong allies, and I just think that does need reminding sometimes because now we've got a Labour government, left government, and
Mm-hmm.
hopefully Trump wins in America. We've got two different governments, so I do hope that we can come together and find some sort of arrangement. Say with the climate emissions, is that China and Brazil and many other countries are spewing all these gases into the seas, the pollution in the air, and we're only like 0.2,
Mm-hmm.
0.4% emissions. If the UK just disappeared for one day, the emissions wouldn't change. So we're solely focused on now our new government is creating this GB energy where we want to go sustainable, renewable.
Mm-hmm.
We put billions and billions into it. We cannot fund this, and they're still doing it. They're still aiming to cut
Yeah.
everywhere else, like stopping the pensioners. And we're going to fall into a trap eventually where we've got no money.
Yeah, and that's because the climate crisis, a lot of Republicans like to pretend it's all one big hoax, but there's issues with pollution. Like everybody agrees, there's issues with pollution. What you're seeing though is that there's an entire new industry that's it only exists because of all of these new rules and regulations and everything. So there's a lot of people making a lot of money off of changing from this type of car to this type of car, from going from this battery to this battery, to going for, using this mineral to this mineral. All of these things are a shift in a lot of money. And so there's a huge racket around climate change, and it's not to say that it shouldn't be taken seriously or addressed, but the way that it's being done is a total disaster, and it's just people lining their pockets, when they can.
Yeah, it's those type of young people that are looking to the future and they want to participate in the climate change, but they're not engaging in politics and voting. So what strategies do you find most effective in engaging young voters, especially those who are not traditionally aligned with the Republican Party?
Well, it's this is something that I specialize in, because in growing our organization to the size that it is now, and seeing the participation in local politics from a young people's standpoint, is that you have to do things that they're interested in, right? You have to, we do events every single month, and you can't just meet at the library and talk about taxes. Like, it's just not going to attract young people to come to an event like that and start getting engaged. We do a lot of very fun things here in Tampa Bay. We'll rent a yacht and we'll take everybody out on a boat, and we'll have a big party. And we venues that are fun for people to actually engage with topics that are things that they care about, right? We just did a huge event. We've got a ballot initiative here regarding marijuana legalization. And so this is something that we went and talked about. Young people are interested in these things, and then you have to meet them on social media. You have to meet them on all other places that they're having these types of discussions and everything. And if you do all of those things and you engage young people in the right way on the issues that they want, on the platforms that they're using, they might just start voting in the election, because now they're getting text messages from us. They're getting engaged with us. They're coming to events. They're telling their friends. And then when it comes to campaigns, you have to get involved with campaigns so that they focus on young people. I'm getting very involved this year with everything going on here in the state of Florida. We're going to send out millions and millions of text messages directly to young people from young Republicans that say, you need to go and vote. Here's who you need to go to vote for and everything like that. And reminding them, because sometimes people don't even remember that they're registered to vote or that when the day is to vote. It's, to us, that might sound very silly because we're involved in politics, but most people just don't engage. At all. We have very, very low turnout for voting. If unless it's a presidential election, maybe we'll get to 70% here in the state of Florida in the presidential election, but that's once every 4 years. We have a lot of other elections that take place in between those times that the election's much lower, like 20%, 10%.
Yeah, we found that also when you've got a general election, the turnout, well, ours is a bit lower than that, about 50. But when it comes to council elections and lower political elections, the turnouts could be 20, 30%. And it is a shame. But one thing we did find with this election, especially with Reform UK, is that hitting social media and TikTok and things like that really, and it saw the spike in young people and Reform UK, and it honestly shone a light on participation for young people. So do
Mm-hmm.
you like social media like TikTok, YouTube, things like that to promote your cause?
You have to. You have to be on Instagram. X has become a great platform because they don't censor us anymore and take down our videos, things like that. Yes, TikTok. I'm 33. I'm like too old for TikTok already. But yes, you need to go to those places to get people involved, and then you have to accept a little bit of reality that youth vote is never going to be the same as somebody the 70-year-old vote. It's just not. I like to think that maybe we can get it close, but in my experience, they just don't vote as much. And it's not just America thing, it's international, it's everywhere. Young people are much more apathetic about voting. And unless maybe you're in a country where there was a war or something that makes people feel like, oh, I really need to vote. My voting is really important because it was taken away, right? You're in Venezuela, no matter who you are, because you got this right taken away from you. It's stripped. These elections are stolen. All of these different types of things, and then they understand how important voting is. But in America, one of the biggest problems that we suffer from is that we just have had it too good for too long. Many of people my age, younger, even the generation above me, we have not really gone off to war on any sort of large scale. We haven't had famine. We haven't had too many riots break out and upheaval. Things can be bad, but they're not that bad.
Yeah,
Everybody's still very comfortable here in America. This is why you see Trump being put into jail. I use this example all the time. They're trying to arrest the president all the time, right? Like they're taking him to court. They're total sham, um, you know, court hearings and everything like that. It's a disaster, and what they're doing to people who protested on January 6th, everything. And Americans just look at it and they go, oh, that's terrible. And then they go to work, the next day. They don't care. And I say in a lot of other countries, if this same thing was happening, the streets would be lined with people, and they'd be protesting for days. They'd shut everything down. You see this kind of stuff in like France, or Israel, or some of these other places where a lot of Muslim nations as well. They will line the streets when something happens. They will protest and show that people will do something about it. America just isn't at that point, I'm afraid that unfortunately I don't think we're going to be in a situation like that anytime soon. I think Americans are very apathetic unless something gets very, very bad.
yeah. France is quite similar to that. I remember that they were writing about the farmers' rights,
Hmm.
and all the tractors blockaded the city of Paris.
Yeah.
But we never get that in the UK. We'll get a few protests every now and again and people sticking themselves to floors, but we won't get them encircling cities. But
Mhm.
like with Donald Trump, if whether he win or loses the election, what is the future of the Republican Party?
The future of the Republican Party is very interesting. It's going in a direction that it has not, and it's because of Donald Trump. It is becoming much more populist. They are taking on issues that Republicans would have never taken on before. And I just talked about the marijuana amendment that we have here in Florida. Donald Trump just came out and endorsed that amendment. Donald Trump wants to try to reform a policy on marijuana that the Republican Party has had for 70 years. That's a huge variation from what we're used to seeing. We've pulled away from being the party of war. That was something when I was growing up. We had George Bush, and it didn't matter if we had Clinton. It didn't matter who it was. Republicans wanted to go to war. Dick Cheney's endorsing, Kamala Harris right now because she wants to go to war. And so Republicans have become increasingly a party of anti-war, a party of freedom. And there's a huge movement that I don't think is very talked about, that Robert Kennedy Jr., if people are paying attention to him and his message, now that Trump has brought him in, this type of Republican, I call it farmers market Republicans. Sometimes they'll say woo woo Republicans, or they'll use different words. But people who are very, very concerned with the products being put in our food, the chemicals being sprayed in our air, poisoning us, through all of these different ways, and his whole thing about making America healthy again. Those are people who are traditionally much more liberal, and it started with COVID, and it started with being, against taking the vaccine. These people are becoming Republicans. So we have a whole new wing of people who are like RFK, who are concerned about the health side of things. And we used to be much more about corporations. Now the Republican Party is becoming much more focused on people, the working class, and the way that it should be, instead of being this elitist group that it used to be decades ago. People used to think, oh, it's Wall Street and all the rich people are Republican and all the poor people are Democrat. That is not how it is. All the money gets given to the Democrats now. All the money from Silicon Valley, all the people from Wall Street, all the corporations, they are giving all the money to Democrats. They outspend us everywhere because they're the party of elitists now.
Yeah, like the whole Kennedy family, that's a big political
Hmm.
elite family, very, very rich. And the whole family endorsed the Democrats. And then RFK's left to run as an independent.
Hmm.
And as it's starting to pick up steam, they start trying to cancel him, so on and so forth, call him things. And watching it from across the pond, Robert F. Kennedy, I did believe some of the things he was saying. It made sense that we do need to be healthy and we need to watch what we eat. We need to, because there's a lot of foods that are being processed, battery farm chickens.
Hmm.
You know, I buy organic eggs and more expensive, but they're healthier for you. And this is where I do think RFK's message of making America healthy again, it united that independent base and his base to the Republican Party. And so my
Hmm.
question is, do you think it is a political game changer for independent voters?
I think it's such a game changer. I think it's Republican, it's Democrat, it's an issue, issues that I've cared about for a long time. I often tell people, they'll ask me, why did I get involved with the young Republicans? Why would I get involved in the Republican Party? Because, oh, look at all these things that they do that are bad. And I tell people, we have two parties in America. You got Democrat and you got Republican. Independents are never winning. We don't have a parliament system like a lot of the European nations do. We don't have this big variety of six or seven or eight parties that might closer align. We have two parties. And if you want to change them, you get involved with one and you change it from within. And I've been a Republican my entire life since the day I turned 18. And I want to change the things that I want to change. And I think that RFK is a huge piece of that puzzle. When you ask a European, or basically anybody from outside of America, you ask them about, Americans, can you describe an American? Most of them will tell you that we're fat, right? Most of them will tell you that we're fat and we're out of shape, and that we're not healthy, and that's our food. That's our food. One thing that the European Union has gotten right, and we used to make fun of them for it, is you have a huge list of banned chemicals that for food, the ingredients that are put in our food. These are not accepted anywhere else in the world other than America, and then maybe places we've exported it to other countries. So these are things that, like, I want to see the European list of all the ingredients that are banned because they're cancerous, or because they're unhealthy or dangerous for kids, or all that stuff. I would love to see that exact same thing put into the Republican Party platform and say, we're going to go in and we're going to ban all of these things, because this is the type of thing that's going to fundamentally change the average person's view, because the average person, maybe they don't understand nutrition that well, but when they start to see and talk about these things, they understand that they're unhealthy. They understand that we have an unhealthy culture. And if a party comes in and grabs it like RFK is, and if we embrace him and we bring him in, this is a whole new wing of the party that can exist.
Because back to the UK, we don't really have a political activist that's adamant and wants to push that message of not just healthy eating but lifestyle.
Mhm.
Um, the only part that does kind of come to mind is Reform UK. Now, I was going to ask, are there any UK politicians that you admire or respect? Because
Well,
there's a
I personally, I do like Nigel Farage. I think he's doing, I think he's done a good job, in the past. Like I said, the hard part about, being in American politics is that, it's we're so focused on America. And a lot of times when I travel internationally and I speak to different, people in different parties, across the world, and I ask them, I'm like, what can we do? Who can we support? What politicians can we support over there? This, and that. And they'll always tell me just get Trump elected, right? Because they'll say get Trump elected because then everything else will trickle down and they'll all have to change their tune a little bit. Um, but I think in the UK, from our standpoint, to hit on some things that maybe your viewers will care about, is that, uh, Americans only started noticing what's going on in the UK when they see that there's some sort of resemblance of the things that they're now experiencing, and I think that is all around immigration. And so with you guys, in the UK, you have had this, crazy, immigration policy where you're bringing all these people in unvetted, giving them things. And then the big thing that this year, specifically to the UK, was the censorship that your government has started to impose. Putting people in jail and arresting them for freedom of, what we have freedom of speech. Maybe you don't have exactly the same thing in the UK. They're coming after people who are criticizing migrant crime and not prosecuting the crime, right? Like this was absurd to people in America to see this type of thing. And it's look, and we're headed in that direction in America. If it were up to the Democrats, we would have the exact same thing. But it is absurd for us to witness that, and I think that's something that's very scary for us as Americans to witness what's going on in the UK, because we see our future, because the European Union, and a lot of the rules and the things that you're seeing over there will come to America. We're just a few years behind because there's more control over the European Union and being able to implement these crazy policies. America's a much larger, messier political ball to unwind, as the globalists are trying. They're figuring out. There's a lot more protest here, as far as, pushback from both
yeah,
parties.
because we about that when they were putting all the people on Twitter were going to jail for commenting
Yeah,
on the government, the Labour government, were releasing criminals from
yeah,
prison to make room for the people that commented on Twitter and Facebook.
I know.
And to me, that is just a slippery slope down to a dystopian 1984 setting. And it is, and now just talking about it now, it is a scary future for people. I'm only 18, but there's going to be younger children that are going to experience things like this. And this is why we're hoping that this Labour government is only a one parliament, 1 4 year term, because I really don't see how it'll benefit the people in the future. That's why Nigel Farage and Reform UK, their sole objective now is to stop this and tackle this illegal immigration. So you're
Hmm.
getting millions across the border from Mexico, and we're getting hundreds of thousands on little dinghy boats from France. And they've traveled. I don't know if they've done the same in America, but they've traveled about 5, 6 safe countries to then get to
Hmm.
France and jump on a boat to come to the UK because we give them the benefits, the NHS,
Yeah.
the phones, and that. So is it the same in the United States? Is that they come from?
So United States, a lot of people think that all we're getting in is Mexicans, and that is not the case. That is where the border is open. Under Kamala Harris and Joe Biden, they just opened the border. They just opened the border, and they are coming from all over the world. Name a country. and they are coming up through the Mexican border. And we're seeing people from the Middle East, from China, from, every Central American country, South American countries. Trump alluded to it, but places like Venezuela, they're opening up their prisons and saying, we're so bad here. Hey, send them up to America. They'll give us their prisoners, because they don't want them in their country. So they'll just send them to America, and we let them in, and we give them benefits and everything. The immigration crisis. I think the problem with the immigration crisis, why some Americans aren't hit as hard by it, is because we are a big country, and even with the highest estimates of 15 million people or so over the last 4 years. But if you've got a small town, maybe 10,000 people, and then 5,000 migrants come in, they feel that's a very small city. I'm from South Florida. We've always been a melting pot of Latin American countries. Miami is made up of people from Colombia and Venezuela and Haiti and in all of the Caribbean countries, Jamaica and Floridians and all the New Yorkers that come down, right? Like, so we've always had a big mix here. You can't tell as much that this is big migrant crisis because of the fact that Florida has always been a big melting pot. But some of these very small Midwestern cities are not used to that kind of thing, so they're starting to feel it. That's why you're starting to hear and see some of the stories that come out of there. But places like the UK, which has been, racially and ethnically the same for a very long time, and a lot of these other countries they've got identities. French have French identity, the Germans have German identity, until you start importing all these other people that are not what the countries are used to. So I think that the European countries feel it a lot more. Americans don't feel it as much unless you're on a border town, unless you're in a small town. It's just so spread out.
Yeah, because I think a lot of people do need to realize that America, each state is like its own country. You
Hmm.
know, UK is the same size as, I don't know, maybe one of the smaller states.
Yeah.
Uh, we've got a population about 60, 70, nearly 80 million, round that. And we're getting, the size of Liverpool and Manchester, which are one of our bigger cities,
Hmm.
coming in a year. And it's that simulation of people that they're not coming in and going, well, I'm British now, and
Hmm.
and there lies the problem, is that the culture then starts to change, and the identities in schools, our school systems, this wokeism is just washing through all
Hmm.
our institutions, and it is becoming a problem where children are being learned different parts of history and what the agenda is that they want to teach them. You know, we had a British Empire. When you're in school learning about it, there's no positives. It's all negatives.
Hmm.
Don't learn about the good that we did, the change, the democracy, everything that we've done. This is the problem with the UK, I think, is that we get slated and attacked for everything we've done. But we need to think we've been here 1,000 years as a nation with
Yeah.
kings, governments, everything we've done in the world. Without us, the world would be a very different place. And it's the same with America. If America wasn't here during World War II, World War One, we'd, you know, we'd have fascist tyranny washing over Europe right now. So, you
Hmm.
know, is the problem is that the UK and America are very close allies, and that we do need to, like you said, America wants to concentrate on their own thing, and I get that. So do
Hmm.
we. But the Republican Party and Reform UK were fighting the same cause. So
Hmm.
I do believe that hopefully after, well, we won't, if we have a snap election soon enough, we may see a Trump and Nigel Farage team. But if that doesn't happen, I do hope that then this is the question, is that the next Republican president, is it gonna be JD Vance? Is there questions on who is it going to be next? Because we do know Trump's only got one term left. What
Yeah,
is
I think there's going to be huge questions on the next Republican. There JD Vance, I'm sure, will be looking at it. Governor DeSantis, who I supported, for a very long time now. He would be an excellent president. His presidential election didn't go well because he was running against Trump, but like you said, in 4 years, maybe that's different. You're going to have different people in the Republican Party. The goal with picking JD Vance is to Trump started a movement with MAGA, right? And a lot of times it's used as like a slur here. They will say like, "Oh, you're MAGA Republican." It's about, and Trump always has the best answer. He goes, "I don't know how you're upset about it. It's about making America great. Like, what's the what's the problem?" But that movement within the Republican Party, that populism that I've talked about, the changes that we've seen. Um, the old guard isn't going away just yet. And they're going down kicking and screaming. This is the Dick Cheneys, the George Bush, um, Mitt Romney, Liz Cheney, all these different people. They're going down kicking and screaming because they know that they cannot win a Republican primary election anymore, and they're losing ground to people like Vivek Ramaswamy and JD Vance and Governor DeSantis. These people who a lot of older Republicans might describe as far right or extreme or anything like that, but they're not. They're really not. But they're being presented that way because the old guard does not want to give it up just yet, and that's the goal of the young Republicans is you have to kick the doors down a little bit to get in, because I think that we are a very different mindset than those who are leading the country. I think that one thing I really would like people to take away, if you're not familiar with American politics, is that people will often say the Republicans did this, when they say the Republicans did this, they usually are referring to people in Washington D.C. who did something. So it might be like Mitch McConnell, our Senate leader. um, it might be Mike Johnson, who's our Speaker of the House, or it was before it was all these other Republican Speaker of the Houses. These men, usually men and women that are up in Washington D.C. speaking for the Republican Party, do not represent the Republicans as a whole for the entire country. The grassroots feel very, very badly about these leaders. They have a very low approval rating. The Republicans for many years have been so upset with the leadership we've had in Washington, D.C., but we can't get them out because, for all the reasons that, the problems that we have with politics here, we can't get them out. But we try to get them out and then we can't. And what they do up there does not represent how most Republicans feel around the entire country. Like I said, these guys have like a 10% approval rating when you look at them. Congress has like a 12% approval rating any given year. We're not happy with what's happening in Washington, D.C. They do not represent actual Republican Americans.
Yeah. So just one final question then. Who do you think is going to win the 2024 presidential election?
Well, I've been saying that if you walked into a bar anywhere in the country, Trump wins. Unfortunately, that's not how elections work in America. And like I alluded to before, many of the states that we're going to be relying on do not have good election laws. I would not be surprised to see a lot of the same strange election night occurrences that may take place. Um, I believe Trump is much more favored. Yes, absolutely, and we're all hoping for him. My worry is about the election. My worry is about what happens that night. My worry is about the cities that we are relying on to win this election. This is going to come down to Pennsylvania. So Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, very corrupt city. Detroit, Michigan, one of the most corrupt cities in the country. Las Vegas, Nevada, Sin City, one of the one of the most corrupt cities in the country. Atlanta, Georgia has become one of the most corrupt cities in the country. These are the cities that we are relying on to count our votes correctly on election night, and I hope it goes our direction. So we all believe Trump will win. We believe he's more popular. All of the momentum is there. That's not how elections work, and that's not how election nights work. So we're going to figure it out the night of.
Well, I do hope Trump wins. And I just want to thank you for your time and this has been a truly enlightening conversation for me. American politics isn't necessarily shown over here as much. It only gets highlighted when there's a presidential election, but this is really going to help the viewers in the UK to truly get a grasp of people in America and how they feel about politics. So I do just want to thank you, and I hope that your cause in the Young Republicans go well and it continues to support young people in politics. So I do thank you.
Well, thank you for having me, and I'm welcome. We'll come back anytime to talk about any of the issues because I like to give the perspective of what's actually happening here in America. Because, like you said, the news is only going to cover big headlines out of Washington D.C., and that's not accurate to what people believe here.